everyone, my name is Lydia. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at ATU Donegal. My research project Unlock is funded by the National Forum for the Enhancement of Teaching and Learning in Higher Education. I presented at the iNote Symposium on Tuesday in relation to a recent paper that's in review at the moment with my colleagues at ATU on student engagement in online environments. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that research, but I'm also going to cover some postgraduate research results as well in relation to COVID-19. So I'm just going to wait on my slides to come up there. I'm not sure if you can see them, but hopefully they'll come up shortly. There we go. All right, so we'll just get stuck in then, see if this clicker works. Okay, so what is student engagement? So it is quite a buzzword at the minute and it's used interchangeably. Despite there being 173,000 scholarly articles and more than 7 million Google hits, there's still little consensus among researchers, practitioners and policymakers on how the student engagement construct should be defined. There are various useful socio-cultural definitions, such as NSTEP's recent one that's on the screen here, which is student engagement is a process by which students and staff seek to work together to shape decision-making in higher education, building individual and collective capacity and knowledge to navigate institutional structures and cultures. In terms of actually measuring student engagement, though, we have to consider it functionally in order to do rigorous and sound research. I recently carried out a literature review on student engagement during COVID-19, and while there were many reports on student engagement or implying that they were measuring student engagement, in many of those cases, what was ultimately being measured was presenteeism or attendance. Now, what we need to do is consider what student engagement means and encompasses in terms of human processes and responses to adequately test it. And when we do that, we find that the NSE, or the National Survey of Student Engagement, which is a national American survey, is the most popular and robust validated measure of student engagement. The NSE adopts a behavioural-based multidimensional model containing 10 factors or indicators and 47 items. Now, the studentsurvey.ie is based on the NSE, with the main difference in the data I'm discussing today being that the NSE has 10 indicators and studentsurvey.ie has 9. However, it should be noted that theoretical models of student engagement extend beyond those behavioural-based manifestations encompassed by the NSE and studentsurvey.ie. For example, Balwant's theory of engagement draws upon organisational psychology and considers student engagement as a three-dimensional construct that presents through behavioural, cognitive and affective manifestations. Similarly, research by Bowden supports a four-dimensional concept with the cognitive, behavioural and affective manifestations, and then the addition of the social element as well. However, to my knowledge, there are no sort of national-based validated measures that support these kinds of manifestations, and it would likely involve going beyond surveys to include objective measures as well. So for this piece of research, we will consider engagement under the 9 indicators from the NSE and the studentsurvey.ie, which are just on the bottom left-hand corner there. Before we go on with the results, I might set the scene in terms of COVID-19. So in March 2020, we went to the emergency transition to online learning. At the same time, evidence starts to emerge to show that students report increased levels of stress, anxiety, depression, fatigue and loneliness, and a reduction in happiness and optimism. In an Irish context, research begins to reveal feelings of isolation and lower levels of motivation among students. Evidence emerges of concerns about academic performance and disruptions to sleep patterns. 55% of UK researchers said that the pandemic would have a negative impact on their career trajectory, and indeed there was a 26% decrease in the initiation of research projects and a 15% drop in journal submissions. At the same time, teaching staff report increased levels of stress and anxiety, poor quality of work-life balance and poor quality of psychological well-being. Okay, in terms of methodology, so the data is collected in February and March each year. So we have the data from 2019, 2020 and 2021. It's just worth noting that the 2020 data was collected just before COVID. So the COVID data that we're comparing here is the 2020 to 2021 data. As many of you will know, students are recruited via email and through a series of promotional advertisements from studentsurvey.ie and the institutes as well themselves on social media and on the institute premises. And there's an incentive offered as well. So they do a series of raffles that include vouchers and AirPods and Fitbits and that sort of thing. In the TOT project, the demographic information is collected and institutional data as well, so like department and programme level and that kind of thing, but we're not concerned with that today. And in 2021, participants also completed specific questions on their institute's responses to COVID as well. Also, the data is categorical, so it's a bit like a Likert scale where you have like one is very little, 4 is very much, and it's very hard to make comparisons on that kind of categorical information. So that's changed to a standardized score of 0 to 60. So when I present the means now in the next slide, you'll see that's out of 60. Then in terms of the postgraduate research students, this data is collected biannually. So whereas the TOT programs is every year, the postgraduate research is biannual and it's based on the PRES. 2021 was really the first year for us that we actually had an adequate response rate. Nonetheless, we don't have large numbers and only had 12 responses in 2019. So it's hard to do a lot of rigorous analysis on that, but and we're still trying to work our way through it, but we will do what we can with it, and hopefully as we become ATU together now, we can perhaps combine that and make more sense of the data. But anyway, I'll just give you a very quick snapshot of it today. In terms, so I'll just move on to the indicators now. Let's see if this will go on. There we go. So quantitative reasoning, higher order learning, and reflective and integrative reasoning didn't change at all during the transition to online learning. However, in all instances, quality of interactions items decreased following a switch to online teaching and learning, with large effect sizes occurring among student and student interactions. Here, the scores dropped about 10 points from 46 out of 60 to 36, to around 36, 37. Nonetheless, all types of interactions were affected. Administrative, support services, academic, it was all significantly lower with small to moderate effect sizes. And thus, all of them should be considered when strategizing for future change. Okay. Again, for collaborative learning as well among peers, there was an overall mean effect of time. So scores went down significantly in 2021. And this isn't really surprising given just the 10-point dip that I presented in the last slide there. So students were less likely to ask another student to help them understand course material, explain course material to another, work with other students on projects or assignments, or prepare for exams by discussing or working through course material. Although the effect sizes were small, effective teaching practices were also significantly lower following the switch to online learning. Apart from the items pertaining to clearly explained course goals and requirements and taught in an organised way. Quite interestingly, learning strategies were actually significantly better in 2021 than they were in 2019. For example, students reported viewing their notes significantly more in 2021 than the previous 2 years, and they also reported identifying key information from recommended readings more in 2021 than in 2019. However, the effect sizes are quite small here. In terms of supportive environments, the use of learning support services didn't change, and importantly, providing support for students' overall well-being also didn't differ significantly, which is quite important considering some of the statistics I presented earlier. And I'm sure it's quite a testament to a lot of the research and work that's been demonstrated at this conference this week. However, items such as contact among students from different backgrounds, help to manage non-academic responsibilities, and provisions of opportunities to be involved socially did go down significantly. And the results from the student-faculty interactions also found significant differences, so it went down significantly following the move to online learning, but the effect sizes were small to medium there. Now, there was the separate COVID-19 items. You can see here that the majority of students felt happy with the supports and facilities provided by the Institute during the COVID-19 pandemic. But at the same time, almost half of students felt disconnected from their institute. Now, as this module was introduced in 2021 only, we can't compare the feelings of connectedness to the previous years at the Institute. But we can look at the literature. And if we look at Rovey and Jordan in 2004, they did a direct comparison between feelings of connectedness during planned online learning and on-campus education. And the online learning, the levels of connectedness were about 29 out of 40, which seems quite low. And then on campus, that was 32 out of 40, so just a difference of 3 points. So actually, there's not really a massive difference there based on that literature. And what the question is what is normal? What's a normal percentage of connectedness, and to what extent did these feelings of connectedness really decrease due to online education during the pandemic? It certainly warrants further consideration and exploration. And now having a look at some of the postgraduate results here. So there's a few different items in the postgraduate research. One, so around 87% of postgraduate research students agreed that their institute provides them with ongoing, effective and timely communication. About 64% disagreed that their funding was affected. 84% agreed that they had adequate access to on-campus facilities required to engage with their research, and about 74% said that they had an appropriate home environment. Interestingly, 68% felt connected to their institute, so it's a little bit different from the taught programs. Now, it's hard because the number of respondents is so small and so varied in comparison to the taught one, but we shouldn't ignore it either, and so it's quite interesting to look at. But again, it's just a brief snapshot. This is some more of the postgraduate research results as well. So this is just one output out of 13 that you can get from the postgraduate results. So yeah, again, we can see whenever we look at this, whenever we benchmark it, so the data there is our postgraduate research data, and when you benchmark it to the national data, and both in 2019 and 2021, we can see that actually it's quite maintained during the pandemic. I mean, looking at it visually, the 2019 data and the data there in the green doesn't seem to vary an awful lot. Certainly it does need more exploration, but it's quite indicative of some form of maintenance in terms of research skills. But yeah, so this is just one of the 13 outputs. And the point that I sort of wanted to make here is that doctoral and MRes students don't really identify with the wider student body. Certainly that's what's coming up in the literature. And their day-to-day experiences are much more like a salaried staff research member rather than the actual taught program students. And it's worth considering as well because 85% of early career researchers in the UK reported they experienced anxiety and stress during COVID, and a whopping 80% experienced fatigue and burnout. So we shouldn't overlook the experience of research students just because we have small numbers. We want to improve student engagement and experiences across the board for everyone, not just the majority. And I'd like to just take this opportunity as well to say if anyone is a supervisor or educational practitioner, I'd like to encourage you to engage with the InTouch iGraduate dashboard created by studentsurvey.ie. You can get this kind of data for your institute on it, and you can have a look at what's happening both in terms of the taught and the research programmes. If you're at ATU Donegal, myself and Dr. Deirdre McClay are gatekeepers, so please do get in touch if you want to have a look at them in more depth. I'll quickly move on because time is of the essence. In terms of discussion, the results from the effective teaching practices indicator supports suggesting that teachers were not equipped with the training or tools to abruptly switch delivery formats in the initial phase, which is certainly not surprising when many of the programmes were indeed designed to be taught in person. However, that maintenance of the quantitative reasoning, the higher order learning and reflective and integrative practices really demonstrates the resilience and innovations of the staff at ATU. And that significant increase in the learning strategies as well among students also showcases the resilience and the motivations of the students too. The findings indicate that what works in a traditional in-person environment may not easily translate to online teaching and learning. As many of you have spoken about, time and effort are required for instructors and students to trial and practice and address challenges around online collaboration tools. And, for many cases, that just wasn't possible during the emergency switch. But luckily, there are conferences like this, which demonstrate the case studies and experiences of others in implementing new strategies moving forward. So this is great. And finally, in terms of impact and applications, firstly, even though there are an abundance of technological solutions designed to enhance student engagement in online learning, it shouldn't be assumed that these alone will sufficiently negate the challenges met by a switch to online learning. Instead, it may be the case that staff training is needed to increase student feelings of connectedness and levels of interactions during online learning, indeed, if connectedness does go down online. Secondly, irrespective of the technical abilities of staff and students, collaborative learning and student-faculty interactions are negatively impacted in online learning at present. So Paulson and McCormick conducted research on planned online learning and planned face-to-face education, and they found that even when it was planned, collaborative learning, student-faculty interactions and quality of interactions remain diminished. Nonetheless, I would say just because this is the occurrence in online teaching and learning at present, it perhaps shouldn't be considered unavoidable. The strides that have been made in online delivery since the inception of the pandemic have been major. And so I would propose that future research should strive to explore means of addressing the shortcomings of general planned online modalities to ensure that future students can one day obtain comparable experiences online. And thirdly and finally, having a blended educational model will enable both staff and students to be more confident and prepared in the future. Folks, thank you so much for having me. If you have any questions, just let me know. Okay.